Thank you so much for coming here today to join us for this very special seminar, Igniting Virtual Production with Fireframe and ARRI Solutions. So just a small introduction. Last year we were very nicely introduced to the fine people at Fireframe, and they were working on a very interesting project. They were building an LED in-camera VFX volume in Finland, and we were talking and they wanted some support and some guidance when it came to color. So the guys in ARRI Solutions had been working on some workflow and some methods on how to make sure the content being displayed on the screens would match what the camera sees in the foreground. So the team and our color scientists and quite a few parts of ARRI came together to come up with a solution, and Fireframe were one of the very first to implement it into a production. I'd like to introduce Anemi Kusela, Business Development Director and Producer at Fireframe. Her colleague Markus Helminen, he is the Technical Director on the stage. We also have David Birnbach from ARRI Rental, Head of Technical Solutions. And we have John Christian, who was the DP on the project, a rare grand alignment. I would like to now pass over to Anemi to just speak a little bit more about Fireframe and where they come from.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Anemi Kusela. I'm Head of Business Development and Producer at Fireframe Studios, Finland. And I actually think we could start with our show reel, you think?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yes, please. So can I have the video?
Hopefully this video will explain a little bit more better than I did at the start.
The unconfirmed number of casualties is 7 at the station.
Turning dreams into reality. In the lab with the formula in chemistry.
Käänny oikealle.
Sorry, before I continue, I did forget one very special guest, Andy Oosterhuis, joining us from Munich, and he is the lead software developer at ARRI Solutions, and he's enormous. that is to scale. So, Anemi, I'd like you to maybe give us a little bit of background of Fireframe and where you guys came from and how you ended up getting into the wonderful world of virtual production.
Yes. So Fireframe has been established around 2 years ago, but we have been now running our volume in full potential a little bit over 1 year at this moment. And we have had, as you saw, we have had very many different kind of productions already, all the way from music videos to commercials to episodic content, movies, and so on. And we are like a mixed batch of talents from different fields of industry. So we come from gaming, from traditional VFX, from broadcasting, live events, and whatnot. And we have divided Fireframe as 3 sections. We have Fireframe Studios, we have Fireframe Films, and Fireframe Academy. And we have our studio in Helsinki, Finland. And we have possibility to customize our solutions so that we can actually move, for example, volume to other space or whatever need. So just to make everything clear and fine for the productions. And then we are actually very excited because we are now expanding our operations to Middle East and Asia next. So that's a pretty cool thing. And then Fireframe Films, we are offering turnkey solutions for virtual production, also on a content side. And we are looking for co-productions. And then we are actually now working on a virtual production movie slate. So we are looking for scripts that fits perfectly to shot in a volume. So that's also new and exciting thing. And then we have Fireframe Academy, which we are in very beginning still, but as we all know, there is a big need of talents in the industry. So we are trying to not just help ourselves, but also the whole industry to make to get more talents to the work for in virtual production industry. And yeah, it's okay. And we are actually working on a virtual production curriculum with the local universities, our industrial partners, and also with our international schools. And actually, we were shooting our first feature film beginning of this year with JC, Marcus. And it was very interesting production. It was our own production, first of all, and we are very excited about it. And we are also making a behind-the-scenes document out of it. And I would love to show you now a behind-the-scenes trailer, and then we can move on to the more technical side. Thank you.
Roll clip.
And then, silence all set. Roll sound.
Rolling.
The virtual production industry, it's so new that there are no clear standards yet.
Roll up.
And that's the beauty of the whole thing.
Here we go. First position, please.
You can create something new.
And filmmaking is kind of a 100-year-old thing.
And action.
And we are now moving this film into a computer with guys that have been doing programming for gaming.
I mean, Mikko and Fireframe are now showing how we can bring and utilize a lot of that knowledge in the film industry.
That's what we need. We need pioneers that will push limits and try new things.
It creates new rules for making. Environmentally, how much did we save without going somewhere? All the trucks, all the people, all the hotels. Well, I think this is amazing.
So it's crazy what we've done in one day. I moved all my lighting, I moved my sun, and we shoot the other direction. It gives you a freedom to work quite fast inside a very controlled environment.
I feel very, very lucky to have done it because this script was perfectly made for this kind of situation, for this volume. I know we've definitely done some stuff that other people haven't done yet.
I didn't realize there'd be so much motion sickness working on this film.
90% of the film is taking place inside this cable car.
When we look out of the window, we see the mountains exactly how they are in Norway, you know. But it still gives a feel of the real thing. It's just imagination that stops you. You can get whatever backdrop you want. It's definitely the future, yeah.
Last time, it's a wrap, property wrap.
We have some great stuff to work with. Too bad it's not a 4-hour movie.
When you are 57 and you are learning more in 2 months than I've learned the last 10 years, it's very refreshing, and I love it. Wow, this is something new.
So I'd like to go to Marcus, the head of technical solutions at Fireframe, and I wanted to ask, why was it so important that you worked with ARRI on developing this color pipeline and having this management tool available to the production?
Sorry, yeah, it's working. We did our own R&D for almost 1 year before we started to have the actual productions coming in. The one missing piece was always to get the colors right in the camera. So it's super tricky. The LEDs itself, the camera response is so different than the human eye. So we actually, it was something that is needed, and I'd recommend for every production. And when we got the offer that we could be the first ones to test out ARRI's new color management, we were like super excited. And it was a little bit tight on schedule, so we probably got it implemented just a week or two ago before we started the production. So this production was the first one. But to be able to see kind of the ground truth in colors is really, really important. And we a little bit extended all the functionality of this color management tool. And we actually, for this production, I think JC can talk a little bit more about the pre-grade states that we developed for this production that we ended up using in all the other productions after that. So we basically, we grade all the material. It might be plates, it might be full real-time 3D scenes, but we have a colorist on site. We do it as a one step before the production, usually 1 week before. And to be able to match the LED colors to the camera is like, I don't know, I think you can carry on with this. It's like super exciting.
If in order to produce that convincing image, to tell that convincing story, the worlds have to match. And if the worlds don't match, then the game's given away, and you can't tell that story properly because you're not concentrating on the story, you're concentrating on what is a mismatch. So having that seamless blend between the worlds it's very critical. I'd like to pass over to Andy Oosterijk. He was the lead software developer on the ARRI Color Management. I'd love him to maybe walk through a little bit in a bit more detail of what that process is and how we approach this topic.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me virtually. By the way, nice to see the footage for the first time from the Fireframe production. It really looks amazing. So yeah, when it comes to color management, for us, the most important part, of course, is the predictability, as Marcus has already mentioned. So you want to be able to produce colors in pre-production and then be able to match those colors if you film them back off an LED wall. So I did prepare a couple of slides that will easily explain everything that we did. Maybe we can pull up the first one, which we already saw in the background, and that will give a great overview of what we're trying to accomplish. So instead of my massive face on the wall. Okay, so what we can see here is the general setup, right? We have an Unreal Artist's workstation, and the Unreal Artist views the scene through any display monitor. And then we've got the more complex part beside it, which is, of course, a camera filming that scene off an LED wall. And the initial intent always is that those two need to match, because if you are in an environment that you have a calibrated monitor somewhere and creating that environment for the virtual production, then if you go back into the stage and notice that the colors no longer match, then suddenly you have a lot of work to do in order to get those colors back. So on the next slide, I think that's the approach that's currently done a lot, which is quite expensive, and it's not a lossless pipeline that you would expect. So you implement a complex color management system on an already incorrect image if you don't have any color management in the background, meaning you're trying to get colors back, but you've already lost a lot of information, meaning that you will no longer be able to fully match your original intent. And with the pipeline that we implemented on the next slide, I hope, at least, yeah, you can see that that step is now no longer necessary. So you can actually go in pre-production and do the color there, instead of having to try to figure out how to get the colors back in on-set production. So of course, it's still helpful to have a color management system or a color correction system in place on set, but you just are then already working in a lossless environment instead of trying to get colors that were already shot back to where they wanted to be. So I've got a couple of examples on the next slide that'll show you what's done wrong a lot across the world currently. So this is our Isabella, who we use as a ground truth with ARRI cameras. So it's a camera recording, an ARRI RAW recording, and it's viewed in Rec 709 through ACES. And on the left is the original, on the right is that captured with a standard Rec 709 workflow. So that's like the LED wall processor to Rec 709. And you can see that everything is completely shot, so the highlights are off, the colors are far too saturated. Everything is just very incorrect. If you go to the next slide, you'll see what happens when you go to a Rec 2020 workflow, which is, of course, a lot better. It has better contrast, it has better color rendition, but the image is still incorrectly tone mapped for the camera to pick it up, which means you are still in the situation that you're trying to get something back which you have already lost in your color pipeline. Now, with our calibration effort and our management tool for Unreal Engine, we're able to get what we can see in the next slide is hopefully, yeah. So that's what you get when you go through an entire pipeline, meaning we will actually be able to reproduce the colors because we know what the sensor does with colors, right? We know how it picks it up. So we can invert that pipeline in the Unreal Engine in order to recapture those originally intended colors on the camera sensor. Yeah, do we have another slide? I'm not sure. If I'm too quick, just give me a wave.
I think that...
No, perfect, yes, perfect, okay. Because I had a couple of more technical slides in the back, but I think they were not necessary. So that's the basics that we're trying to achieve for any production, and it was really great to have the chance to implement this with Fireframe, because with Marcus and the team, it was we immediately understood each other, and so thanks again for that great experience, and yeah, thanks for letting me show you this.
Thanks very much, Andy. And I think a big part of why we did this and the team did this was to create a sort of automated and simplified approach to guarantee that at least the very base truth of your image and your displayed image is correct. And I want to throw now to John Christian as the DP on the rear ground alignment, and I'd love to hear what your experience was like and how it benefited the production and benefited you and allowed you an added level of, I think, control over your image.
Where to start? Yeah, it's fun to be sitting as an expert in LED volume because I've done one movie there, but it feels like nobody have done an entire movie in an LED volume, so we are experts, but it doesn't say much. But yes, we learned a lot, and I came on board. I think the first thing we did was to get rid of the very expensive LED panels in the ceiling that you have just invested a lot of millions in. And I replaced them with lights that could give me more colors and a wider color spectrum, because that's what we are fighting in the volume, is the lack of color spectrum, because if you want to do something in post, you need some colors there, especially for the skin tones. So that was the first thing we learned. And that's also have to do with color management and to realize the limitations and embrace them and work with them so that you can maximize them. That also was the reason why I was trying to get on board a colorist as soon as possible, because this film is taking place 95% inside a gondola. And it changed from overcast day, it goes into afternoon low sun, it goes into night, starry night, northern light, other more, and then, yeah, and then morning, and then morning rise, and then and it gets colder and colder and colder while we are inside, because, yeah, they are there for quite a long time. So how to control this in this environment? Every view that we wanted to see outside of this gondola needed to be tweaked and color graded so that I could live with it as it was, because I know that I will not do much in post with this, because when you have the possibility to really to work in early morning sun for a complete day, you can really be precise. And I think that's the beauty of this, that we shot this film how many days? 25 days, and I think we had 6-hour days with the kids. Yes. So that's not many days when you shoot 12 hours. It's so it would be 12 days normal shoot, or 10 days. So it gives us possibilities. Back to the colorist. He was there at all time, and for me that was super important to be able to communicate colors, and of course with your color science, knowing that what we saw on our monitors was the result. So first thing I think I did was to ask you to buy the biggest TV screen we can get in Finland. There was the LG 65 or something, I'm not sure. And we calibrated that as good as we could. We even got the secret weapon, the remote control where you can turn off things.
Yeah, exactly. We already calibrated them, but then we recalibrated them a couple of times. We also had different monitors, not just the LG. We had for the colorist a couple more precise monitors.
Yeah. I also had one side that was more precise, but to see the size was very important for me, because you're signing off the film when you're there. At least what we was hoping to do, and then to see small mistakes, errors on the volume or wherever they could appear, or just the feeling of I don't believe in this. It looks shitty. And you don't see that before you get it on a very big screen, because on a small screen, everything, on a phone, everything is perfect. So that was important as well. And for me also to push to see dailies. Of course I use TriLab because I'm part of that, but to see dailies going through and to be able to see this as a part of a timeline, to understand the story, that was also for me very important. To get grip of the story as soon as possible while shooting.
For the actual content, we try to get the best colors. We have our LED volume set up to reproduce 12-bit. That is the highest possible to get out of LED panels at this time. We had full ASSCG pipeline, so the cameras we shot raw, and throughout the whole pipeline, the color was managed in ASSCG. The grade was done with EXR sequences, so it was a pretty heavy process, but still we knew that we wouldn't lose any color on the way through the LED screens. And the actual codec that we play back material, at least the plates, it's 16-bit, so even though we do the pre-grade, we still have the 16-bit material, so during the shooting days we all would have had the chance to do those small tweaks, but because everything else the prep was done color-wise so good, we didn't end up having to do much of those tweaks during the shooting days, if I remember correct.
Was that a question?
Yes, because we had this production was we had a little bit short pre-production time, and for the content we had little bit too little time. So spending all those long nights working, I don't remember everything so clearly. So that was kind of why I asked.
Yeah, no, that was. It was on steroids. Also, the pre-production was because people know that. Everybody been reading about this, so you know that. But in practice, you are actually taking all the post-production into pre-production. So everything that you can actually push into the future, you can't do that. You have to be ready with it. When you start to shoot, there had to be something to see outside of the windows, and it had to be in real time, and it had to work. And I don't know how many hours you were spending. We shot the plates 3-4 weeks before we start shooting or something.
Yes.
So it was actually not possible, but you made it.
It's not advised either. But it's production and it happens.
And the plates itself, we only had 1 weekend to shoot. We were super, super lucky that the weather didn't mess everything up. But we got it, but then, because the script demanded that we have all those extra time of days, extra locations, so it was not just vanilla plates. We actually did tons of VFX. We changed the lighting conditions for the plates. We did sky replacement. We added moving elements to those. Then we put them inside the 3D engine. We kind of integrated 3D content into the plates, so it was not just kind of shoot the plates and play them back later. So there was like a long, tedious process to get everything looking good. But yeah, the lesson we learned that we definitely need to have more pre-production time.
Yeah, it's the most important thing when you are planning the virtual production itself, just to have enough pre-production time. That's the key for your success, I would say, really.
And having all those heads of department having that very early on conversation about what the assets are going to be like, where, how we're going to get them, and do we have enough time to optimize those assets to make sure they play back in a real-time way inside the studio. It's so critical that you get that pre-production point right. John, you mentioned a few things that were quite interesting there. 2 types of monitors, one a critical sort of grading monitor, and then a very large display for spotting artifacting. I think that's very interesting because to the eye, a lot of things will look correct, but our eyes lie, and what is really important is what the camera sees, and being able to judge confidently that what the camera is capturing allows you for an inexpensive post-process, I think is really the key here, because the conditions are so critical in what you're doing. I wanted to ask, Anemi, budgeting-wise, how much more effective was this way of shooting versus had an on-location with the child actors in a gondola in all these different, considering what the conditions were?
I would say like 3 times. We really saved a big amount of money by shooting this in a volume. So yeah, 3 times cheaper, I would say, more effective.
And another thing you said, John, was about the ceiling. So you took out the display roof and you replaced it with high spectral output traditional production fixtures.
Exactly.
So not only do you have to display the correct colors, but you also have to illuminate that foreground and that talent correctly as well. Not just relying on the LED wall to be this magic bullet that does everything for you.
Exactly. Oh yeah, that was very important. Yeah, traditionally lighting, but of course sources that you could hide, because we were seeing 360 almost, at least 180 at all time, because it's kids and we wanted that feeling of freedom with the kids. And also to mention, because normally I'm shooting myself, operating, but that's not possible when you do these kind of things. You have to sit behind a monitor. So my colleague Martin Ottebeck, who had been operating for me for many years, he stepped in and did excellent job on this as an operator, because he was inside, locked inside his gondola for 20 days with the kids.
And David Birdback, as the head of technology for ARRI Rental, you've also been involved in quite a sort of broad variety of productions utilizing LED displaying, game engine technology. What have you found to be the most important considerations to be made before exploring or entering into a virtual production environment?
Well, I think you mentioned it already. The biggest problem really is everything that has to do with color and illumination in this. There's other things, and you can tackle them, and if you have a good monitor, you see them array, you know where to shoot, what not to do. But color is tricky, and it's mostly because you use tools and equipment that is not really meant for this kind of production. I mean, all those LED screens have not been, unfortunately, developed for us, but have been developed for sports, for concerts, for outdoor events where the human eye watches content. Now, there's 2 or 3 problems with that. Number one is they're very bad in illuminating things, and that's exactly what we do see a lot of times, that people put proper light fixtures in the volume, as long as it's possible from the angles, to get a better skin tone reproduction, get better colors into the volume. Next thing is directional light and the amount of light. And I've seen with those, it was luckily good for you. It's tough to shoot in a desert with a volume, because you don't get shadows you cast. You don't get all this from such a light source. Yeah, but we don't go down that rabbit hole with our tools. Still, there's the third thing, is basically color reproduction. The camera is different from the human eye. It just sees things differently. We think it's the same, but it's not. So we've seen a lot of times when there's this complicated color correction tools on set, which kind of manages a little bit to avoid this. but it's not reproducible. You lose the quality, you have so much more work, you lose time. So for us, the color management to make this more automated was actually kind of the tool that fits our philosophy at ARRI to make things special for this industry and help people to make their life a bit easier. It's tough enough. So if we can find ways to make it easier, that's what we do. And we've done color management for 25 years, probably 20, yeah. We started with the ARRI laser that we first had to deal with color at ARRI, and now it developed. So it was actually a very, very joyful experience to put that knowledge out there. So yeah, I mean, color, lighting, that's the tricky thing. It's not the silver bullet, those screens.
And Marco, what's next in your studio? What are you excited to be planning, and what are you going to be offering to your next line of clients?
In the future, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I know that what was mentioned, that the LED panels were first developed to a different industry, different use case, but actually these panel types that we use, and for example ARRI Studios use, those are the first ones that are first iterations of those panels that are meant to be shot with a cinema camera. And I'm looking forward to the future years that there will be development. I know that there is work made, a lot of manufacturers are looking into full spectrum LED panels, for example, not shooting against but to the ceiling, so the color reproduction for illumination is more precise, and there is also the technical advances, for example, so that what camera sees will be put through a color matrix that will correct the color for the camera, but all the illumination from every other parts of the volume will be fixed in another way, so there will be two color matrices, the other will fix or compensate for the illumination. So those would be regarding color. I know the cameras will develop a lot. There are certain scenarios, there will be certain problems with the volumes, but newer cameras will kind of mitigate those issues. For example, new Alexa 35, if you want to talk about some experiences, but what I've heard, it's superb for LED use, for example. But I'd say that the quality content for the LEDs will be the biggest hurdle, because it takes so much time to make those good quality assets. And I'm looking forward that this process will be a little bit streamlined in the future. There will be new rendering techniques, for example, neural radiance fields, that will kind of replace the old-fashioned 3D rendering and give you photorealistic results better. Also, the hardware is going, development of hardware is going really quick, so we can expect that the 3D environments that will be, the content of the volumes will be like super much better quality in the future and in the coming years, not too much in the future.
And Andy, in Munich, I'd like to ask you what you can tell us about the version of the color management that we have today versus what Fireframe used initially for the project, and also are you able to tell us about anything exciting that might be coming up soon to share with our friends?
Yeah, sure. So when Fireframe implemented the plugin, well, there were still some usability hurdles you had to take. So this was quite easy with the Fireframe team, but might not suit every team in the world. So we tried to make the usage of it a lot easier, streamlining the calibration process to get walls calibrated in like 20 minutes instead of spending hours and shooting plate after plate. And of course the workflow, so compensating for CCT shifts, because the LED wall creates a certain color space, the camera has a color space, the lights have a color space. Getting all that together is a challenge that we've accepted and are trying to solve and automate for virtual production environments. And of course, with the Alexa 35 and the Alexa 35's new color pipeline, we're also releasing a plugin for virtual production very soon, meaning that the Alexa 35 will be even nicer to utilize in the volume than it already is. So I'm really excited about that, and I can't wait to give Fireframe the first copy.
And finally, to John Christian, what was your biggest learning from the experience of shooting a rare grand alignment? What did you come out with this? Do you want to always shoot in volumes, or have you been put off by the idea?
No, I'm jumping from handheld various analog films into this and back again, and I think that's the way I'm going to continue, because you read the script and you find out how to do the script. That script was perfect for a volume that we did, and I think it couldn't have been done other places, or the film couldn't have been made without the volume. So it made a new possibility for a new story. I think what I learned, I mean, we are film workers. We have a 100-year-old tradition, and I had an excellent Finnish crew that came with me on board, and we went into the studio and we met you and your friends that came from a totally different kind of culture, and to gather those two cultures and to make them work together, I think that was the biggest challenge and the most important challenge, because nobody cares about actually what we do. They care about this. Do we make a film or not? Is it good? Do we get emotions? So that's what the whole thing, how to lend this as a film where hopefully my wife will never see that it was made in a volume. It happened in Norway in 1982.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to now open to the floor for some questions, some Q&A. If anybody would like to know a bit more about the project and about our color management workflow, or any general questions about virtual production, we'd be happy to answer.
Hi. Yeah, I just had a question about, do you think this is at the point where it could be used for pickups? Like, say you shoot on location, don't get everything you need. Would they be able to, are we at the point where it would already be able to match well enough that you could pick up a live location shoot in a studio like this and, you know, blend them together to make it look believable?
Asking me? Or
anyone?
I think that's for you, John Christian, because it's, can you pull it off? Could you do that?
I think in theory, yes, absolutely. But it demands some, again, pre-production, because you need something that you take with you from that set that you can project. That's one thing. And another thing is that we, of course, when we shot this film, I chose lenses by many reasons. But one reason was I wanted a soft lens, not a very hard lens, to forgive and to help me to forgive the background a little bit. And also I shot on a very T-stop 1.32, maybe 2.5 maximum, to also get a shell depth of field. Yeah, so you made some decision to cover the kind of the mistakes or the challenges that you can have. And I don't know if your film that happened in the desert would maybe it would be very wide angle and T-stop 11, and then you would have a problem going into the volume, I think, to match it. Because you have to be kind of friend with the limitations.
Yeah, maybe sort of from off the screen, but I think it's an excellent question, because it's a really cool workflow if you need to reshoot something that didn't work on set. So creating plates there and then being able to reshoot certain things is definitely, I think, a great way to utilize the volume. And if you have the correct color pipeline in place, actually some of the most convincing images were just, yeah, like large plates shot on an Alexa camera at small iris, and project those onto the wall and recapture them with an ARRI camera. Like those in our studio in London, those were some of the best images I've seen so far. So I think it has a lot of potential, this way of shooting in a volume.
I think a lot of stuff is even nowadays done so that the wider establishing shots will be shot with body doubles, and then with the actors, they come to the studio, do the close-ups, middle, something like this. So it's just about having a plate unit or the possibility to, on location, to capture those backgrounds. And you can do it just in case. So if you need to later do some pickups, you have those the same lighting conditions already in those plates that you can do. One thing that is interesting also is that if something needs to be reshot, if the shoot is in the LED volume, so it would be important to capture all the data about all the how everything is set up in the studio. So if it needs to be if there needs to be a reshoot for the day or some pickups, you would capture all the data, all the metadata, everything how everything is set up in the studio environment as well. So you can do pickups later for those.
Hi. How does the depth of field work with the camera? Because the studio, I mean, the volume is not that big, and when you have a subject and you have the, I don't know, the background, the studio, the LED wall not being so far away, how does the fall-off work? Does the wall actually go off focus with the lens, or is it always sharp, and then you just, yeah. I mean, not phrasing it really well, but I think you get it.
From a technical perspective, it is possible to extend the depth of field to get it perfect. There's not a solution. It kind of will double the fall off in a way. Sometimes we just kind of watch the image and kind of try to match the out of focus of the LED to match. We can definitely link it up so that the follow focus is kind of outputting the live metadata, and the 3D scene, you will have the extended depth of field. For 2D plates, we have done R&D that we kind of calculate depth maps, so we can also do that in a certain extent for depth maps. Of course, the bokeh, for example, it's not going to look physically totally correct, and then the best bet to shoot in a volume is how JC described to shoot. Think about those lens choices and distances, and so maybe you can talk a little bit of your experience with the depth of field in our studio.
I think very much of that experience I took with me from shooting with photomask, and when you're using, like a trans lights, you need a certain distance, and you're playing with the focus, with the foreground, and as long as we have something in the foreground that we can have focus on, that is a real thing, like the gondola and the texture on the window, because it was getting colder and colder, so we get more and more moisture, and then ice and things. All of this were helping us to believe that we are, so as you say, we are fighting the distance. We are, because it is 5 meters away, or not. We didn't have that much either. It's a small volume, so we were fighting the distance. And we use smoke also, because you can actually, with green screen it's hard to use smoke. I was so glad suddenly I can just bring in everything that was analog, because if it looks good, it's good. So we used different kind of smoke, and we also used the cooled smoke on the ground, because there is a scene where they're kind of above the sky. So doing that in the studio is also helping to create kind of some real elements that kind of sell the illusion. I don't know if that was an answer, but
But also you talked definitely about those lens choices opening with certain apertures as well, and for example, usually the camera that is chosen to when you shoot in a volume, the large format cameras will kind of have more. You will have more. It will be more helpful to have more control over the focus.
Absolutely, yeah. That was absolutely a reason to shoot LF or a large format camera to get help from the fall off.
So basically, you have to hide the wall with really shallow depth of field. You can work in a deep T-stop because you have the background in focus, and the LED walls are probably not fine enough, right? I mean, the LEDs are probably too far apart.
But you can't really have the wall in focus at, I mean, that's pretty much a ground rule because you will always get more ray effects and nasty things. So you want to push that. We actually we have here on the show also lenses that were specifically designed or tuned to actually have very, very forgiving characteristics on the far end to actually help in the volume. It's the best you can do. Keep it close.
Yeah, and when we had to do a full focus, full focus, yeah, we had to do the traditional green screen.
And I think it's important to say that this all forms a big part of your pre-production planning. When you're planning the distances of foreground objects relative to the video wall, you can be pretty accurate knowing that this camera's positioned at this distance relative to the foreground of the wall. I will not encounter moire, and I will have enough depth to continue to tell my story properly.
Okay, I just have a last question. Marcus mentioned something that the LED walls, they reproduce 12-bit color, and that later on, if it could be replaced by 16 by the plates that were shot originally, how does this work? I mean, you're replacing what you already shot, or?
I think the color depth is certainly enough, because the camera's optical or lens's optical blur kind of like hides it so much. It doesn't have to be just a tiny bit out of focus, and you probably don't have any problems. But the way you do it, you can have the lighting from surrounding LED volume, and then you can have chroma. You can have whatever key you want color there, or you can do it as roto work later and change the camera or the LED image in post if you need. But I wouldn't say that you need that because of some color bit depth. It would be something that there will be done some heavy VFX work afterward, or then some reason, other reason would be to do the for pulling focus to the wall or kind of through the wall. So those cases you would put a little bit of chroma on the LED wall, or then you would roto it in post and change the background.
So will the moire problem go away in the future? Because this is obviously really crucial. If you can't pull to the background, that's a big pain, isn't it?
I fear not completely. I mean, it's a relationship between the pixel count on the camera and the pixel count on the wall. There will always be some kind of death zones where you shouldn't put your focus in. And especially if you don't hit the wall completely straight and like this, you will always have a multitude of like spatial resolutions. So it might go away eventually, but it's a long time until that happens. Because you can't also blur the image because the wall needs to be actually mostly black. Because if like the LED dots are very, very small, because otherwise you get lots of spill because it's all, and you don't get blacks anymore. That emphasizes it.
Hello. I have two more like technical questions. One of which is how do you, because one of the advantages of shooting on green screen over virtual production is the flexibility in post-production compared to the virtual production, which is better on set. And I have a question, is there any way to generate a good key with the visual production? Is there like a clean plate generated by Unreal Engine or something?
Definitely, it's easier to do the chroma in LED Studio. So this version of LEDs is like compared to Chroma Studios is that you get a really even key. You can change the color. You don't have to light the chroma separately. You can, because the color is so consistent, the key color, you can have it on a lower intensity level, so you get less spill. So it's there's many benefits over traditional chroma. You can also capture what 3D what is happening in the 3D environment, and you can capture the tracking data, and for post you could render out those clean plates as well and do the comp work after that. So yes, definitely it's it's done in a lot of productions as well.
Okay, and also I got an idea while thinking about it. Does the limitation of having the green screen be a certain size and not, for example, not having the budget for a full 360 green screen? Is there, I was wondering if in the industry a platform that the actors and the camera and the lights were in that would just rotate would fix the problem?
You mean that the screen is only there where the camera looks?
Yes, and then the actors, the camera operator, and the lights are on the platform that just rotates.
I'm not sure that's less expensive than...
No,
it sounds a bit dangerous, but it could be a fun one, yeah. Well, we had a rotating stage, but it was, I mean, rotating, it depends on, we had the studio in Berlin, yes, that we used for 1899, and it had a rotating stage, but it's rotating slowly. I mean, you can do a shoot and then the other side, but in order to keep the flexibility of a camera or two-camera shoot, you still need a decent size of LEDs, including all the reflections, and it's part of this thing that you need, peripheral vision.
But I can add that we actually did a rotating stage on this film, because we had a gondola and it was the center point. So we moved the gondola around, and the actors was just the actor was the cameraman was moving with the volume. So we always had some volume in front of the camera, and then we moved the gondola around with the actors. So it looks like we are going 360 around the actors, and you see the whole 360 background. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we did, for the tracking solution for this movie, we needed to track the free hanging swinging gondola. That was one tracking system. Then we had another tracking system inside the gondola attached to the camera, and we combined those both. And that was a little bit tricky. But how we pulled off the 360 turns, we just needed to track the gondola, and then the background on the LED would turn how we turned the gondola itself. So we did we do two scenes that way?
Yeah, we did.
Guess, yeah.
We've got time for one last question.
Hi. I'm curious about how in the last sort of year or plus, the technology's changed quite quickly, and it seems like the difference between last year and now, everything is moving very quickly, and obviously the infrastructure is very big and very expensive, and it's still sort of reliant on repurposed screens and things like that, and it's just whether there is going to be a point where, I know you just said that Moray is sort of always going to be like an inherent issue, but I feel like that's quite a big factor, that people are hesitant to use it because of that. And is there going to be a point where maybe things become a little bit more purpose-built and less repurposed? Yeah.
I think that the LED panels itself, that technology is being iterated. All the panel manufacturers will release new models year by year. They will be better and better, but even the first panels that are designed actually for shooting with film cameras, they are so much better than the panels a few years ago. So the panels you have access at this moment are pretty good already in many senses. The Moray itself is not maybe the biggest issue. I know it's talked quite a bit, but there are other artifacts and other problems with shooting LEDs that I find more kind of limiting itself. The Moray, it's more about that if you plan how to shoot, you can kind of work with that. I don't know if it's your experience as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the moire is an annoying problem, but it can be avoided with things that is in your hands. There's other things, and also temporal issues, synchronization issues, frame rate. There's lots of things happening, but it's still a long way until you can shoot as freely as you would in a natural environment. I think that's...
And one last question from the lady in the front here, because she's so patiently waiting.
I love prep. Prep is wonderful. You get to kind of dream as big as you want, especially when you have a volume like this, and being able to really sketch everything out. But is it fun to shoot? Because it feels like it's a lot of checking off boxes, down to the focus pull. Do you get to have magic on set? Do you get to kind of Do you find that it's magical, that it's fun, that it's the way that filmmaking ought to be, which is finding things? Or are you restricted by the to-do list from prep?
No, I felt it very easy to do. I mean, it was a first-time director on this film, and we wanted to shoot handheld freely with a wide-angle lens, not giving orders to the actors. And then I, of course, followed up with the shots that was needed, so we kind of on top of that, but still very freely. And no, it gave me a lot of freedom that I couldn't have had if I had to shoot in magic hour with these 3 kids, trying to get the same kind of result, because it would have just been stress. But it depends on everything, and I don't think I will end up shooting only LED volume for the rest of my life, but I've also done a lot of blue screen, green screen, and I think this was much more fun because I get so much more back of reflections of reality, and the kids could see what they were actually, what was happening outside, so it get a lot back if you compare it to other things, but it's a new tool in the box, and use it wisely if you want to enhance something in a story.
It can be actually that prep is the least joyful in this, because actually this is where you learn your ways and you make the mistakes, and then you still have to check all the boxes and train. But from the feelings that we had, the first weeks were not enjoyable. But once, it's like driving a car, you know. But after a few years, you have all those checks, but you run them, and then you are very free. And the feedback you get it's dramatically better than shooting green screen. It's such a nice environment because you're there. I mean, and if you don't like the mountain, you put it somewhere else. I mean, it can be actually if the crew is nice and if the crew is working well together and you have the basics done, then it can be a very, very nice experience.
I remember the actor, the guy with the beard, after shooting some, some scenes and he came into my tent and like, can I see something? Because it looks so strange, and he felt like, fuck, what am I doing here? And then I turned on and showed him something, and he's, fuck, and he was just sold. He was like, wow, I could see in his face. I mean, he couldn't hide it. He was there, and then after that, he was just smiling because he knew that it looks real.
Thank you.
I think we found quite a lot of happy accidents do happen in these environments because you are so meticulous in the planning, which should, if done properly, allow you some freedom on the day. We had a very nice experience in one of the early productions in our studio in London, where the director, he'd been shooting all day, lots of car process work, and at the end of it, he was like, damn, I wish we'd done that night scene driving through the forest. And he turned to the guy on the brain bar, the playback, and said, don't suppose you've got anything driving through a forest at night. And he quickly looked through the database and went, the trees aren't indigenous to the scene. Like, doesn't matter, put it up. Looked at it, perfect, shoot. And we all were like, wow, now that's powerful. Like being able to get that final scene right wedged in at the end without having to leave the space, it was really incredible. It validated a lot of the work we'd been putting in over that time. And we want those happy, explorations to happen in these spaces. It's really important for it to be adopted, because at the end of the day, how does this benefit me? And if it doesn't benefit me, I don't really want to do it. And we want the technology and the workflows to benefit you guys. And I think on that note, that is the end of the seminar.